Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Giving the Game Away. Today, Ian and I will talk about Facebook and the Oculus Quest. Hey Ian.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. What about you?
Not bad at all. I've broken out the summer shirts as
You
we
have?
enter winter, so it's
Yeah, people are going to think that we recorded this in like a few months ago, but no, it is November.
It is November. I just don't like dressing for the weather. It makes my wardrobe more versatile. Anyway, Oculus and Facebook. So the reason why I want to talk about this today was because we actually had a company presentation in VR this morning.
Yes.
Which it was the first time I've gone through that. I don't know. You're more in the VR space, Sam. Have you had them before?
Yeah, I had seen Spatial before, which is the tool that we used. It's actually a lot better if you're like in VR as well. Yeah. The web version is actually quite handy to just look over it, and it just opens the market to people who do not have the headset. But in VR, it's pretty cool. Like you can literally arrange your dashboard and have screens appearing, and show multiple screens, which is really hard to do in the presentation. Even on Zoom, for example, if I share my screen, you can't share your screen, or at least we can't see both at the same time. So to share information in a spatial environment, it's a really good tool. It's still a bit clunky, I would say, at times, but it's definitely getting there.
Yeah, I mean, we had some, I think it was like bandwidth issues or something. But even with that, even with the occasional stutter, it was really impressive. And my head has been in the VR space. And I was thinking about all the news surrounding Facebook's recent decisions about the Oculus Quest ecosystem, requiring a Facebook profile specifically. To give some background, though, even though that choice was so badly met, the Quest is doing really well. It was the best-selling VR headset last quarter, which is very impressive. It sold like 161K units, which is really good considering there are a lot of blogs out there saying VR is dying, which comes from nowhere. Yeah. The VR as an industry is huge anyway. Like PC VR games are going to make like 189 million in 2020. VR companies are going to hit 915 million in investments in 2020 this year, I think. So it's a huge industry, and I think the Quest and the Quest 2 are incredible because they make it accessible. You don't need a fancy computer. You don't need a high-end desktop or laptop or anything. You just have a standalone headset, and that's amazing. The Quest was actually my first introduction to VR, and it was really impressive. You have a Quest?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a Quest 1. So I mean, standalone VR is really where it's at, right? You don't need the PC, but you also don't need the mobile. So it's kind of like in the middle, and that's definitely the type of device that people are looking for. Just press on, put it on your head, and be ready for it. So it's good. I think the numbers is still pretty small, like 160K sales. It's getting there, but it's difficult. I think there's still this, I guess, issue with people not really understanding why they would need it. It's quite a bit of friction to use. It's not something that solves every use cases. So it really remains a nice to have for now. But the product is really leading the way. I mean, compared to the first headsets, what's available now for a fraction of the price is just really, really impressive. And the new price point for the Quest 2, I think it's $300. It really starts to become a product that everyone can own, which is the path forward.
Yeah, it really is. So the main focus of this is sort of Facebook's forced integration into the Quest 2, and they announced that right before the Quest 2 released. But even with that announcement and Facebook's reputation, it still did pretty well. Like it outdid all sales expectations. Pre-orders for the Quest 2 were like 5 times that of the Quest 1. But ever since it was released, it has had this controversy about requiring a Facebook account to actually use the headset. And for all previous Oculus account holders, there's a deadline. I think it's 2023, where your current Oculus account will be deleted and you need a new one. You need a Facebook account. Don't quote me on that. But so with that sort of software integration, there's huge practical problems. A lot of people are saying that they will lose all of their purchased Oculus Quest games if you delete your Facebook account. If you don't have a Facebook account, you can't even access the headset, which is pretty terrible. I'd love to hear your general thoughts about Facebook forcing account integration into their headset, Sam.
I mean,
It's a tricky one.
Well, is it really? I mean, I don't really see that as an issue personally. I think that it was expected. Like they manufacture, they own the headset. They ask you to use an account that you probably already have to access the content. What's the big deal, right? Like I feel like it's been blown into that massive issue, and it's one of these things where people are saying like, oh, I will boycott Facebook or whatever, I will never use it. But you don't actually see that in the numbers. People are still using the headset because it's the best headset on the market. It's like people saying, oh, I'll move to another country if this president get elected or something, right? They never end up doing it. So there was a lot of noise around it. Personally, I think if you look at how Facebook makes money and what is their goal, it's obviously their goal with VR is that there's a new generation of devices, a new computing platform. Facebook is actually not very strong on mobile, except on the app front, but they do not control the devices. They do not control the operating system. So they are really limited. They're basically dependent on Apple and Google to push new things and to own the customers. So Mark Zuckerberg has seen VR as a new computing platform where he can actually pioneer the hardware and, more importantly, the operating system to prioritize Facebook tools and the way that the data is captured in the platform in a way that it cannot do that on the desktop. It cannot do that on the mobile. The only thing that it can do is betting on the next generation of computing platforms. So that's the reason why he's been so bullish and keeps investing in VR. Obviously, Facebook, their goal is to grab data from users and connect different ecosystems. So they have a really strong social graph. Now they're going to understand how you evolve in the VR space. And, they're not selling that data directly in like a spreadsheet and say, okay, you can buy that. They're just enriching the profile of the users to sell ads at a higher price.
Yeah.
So and that business model is powering the platform, right? We know that there's nothing hidden there. They are definitely doing some data transfers between properties like Instagram and WhatsApp, despite what they're saying. But that's the limit of it. So yeah. I mean,
I suppose
what's the big deal?
I suppose one of the big deals, at least from my perspective, is that everyone did have an Oculus account, and they're sort of just getting rid of that. I think there is probably an element of fear to this. Like people who had Quests from release, they had an Oculus account, they felt safe with the Oculus account, and now suddenly they have to change. And
Oculus is owned by Facebook, right?
Exactly. So, Facebook reputation.
But it's already owned by them. Like
it is.
It's really just a name. Like what I agree on is like making that announcement from Facebook at that time was probably the wrong move from a PR point of view, because now is not the time to basically tell people that, we're going to become even more of a monopoly and we're going to capture even more of your data. Even though we knew this was going to happen, it was a terrible time to announce it and a terrible way to do it. So I don't think they were very diplomatic on that front. But the actual thing happening, like I'm pretty sure that they will already capture the data anyway through the Oculus account. Like, I mean, Oculus is Facebook. Yeah. So I don't think there's any news actually to this, except the fact that the communication was handled in a pretty poor manner. But that's it.
Yeah. It is tricky. The communication is a big part of it. I do think there is a challenge with deleting your Facebook account and losing your games. I think that is a genuine problem.
But surely that would be sorted. Like they can't they can't leave people buying the games again. It will be a smooth process to go from one account to the other.
You would hope so.
I'm sure of that. Now there's definitely issues with privacy and deleting your account. That's complicated, but that's for me that's more of a Facebook issue that is kind of unrelated to the fact that you will need a Facebook account to use VR.
Yeah, of course. I suppose I lost my train of thought completely. 1 second. Oh God. I suppose there is an element of it where I almost think Facebook might be. It's the wrong phrasing, but almost using an Oculus, using ownership of a Quest to keep you on their platform. A lot of people are moving off of Facebook, especially young people. There's a lot of stats to support that. And could this be a way that they sort of convince them to stay within their ecosystem? If you delete the account, or Quest account.
100%. Oh, of course, of course. I mean, every product has a shelf life. Facebook, Zuckerberg has been really smart by buying Instagram and then WhatsApp. Like, why are they doing that? All the reasons there is about defensibility, is about keeping the user within their own network and creating network effects, so that users spend more time on the Facebook ecosystem than on the Google ecosystem, pretty much, because that's who they're competing against. So of course the goal is looking at, okay, Instagram is where it's at now, but what's next? Well, it's going to be VR, there's going to be AR. Let's get ahead of it, because otherwise Google, otherwise Apple or Microsoft are going to do it. So a lot of it is defensibility, is to create an even bigger network. And so far, Facebook is winning the race to XR. I mean, AR wise on the phone, you have Apple, AR Kit, you have AR Core from Google. This is cool, but it's kind of like a stepping stone to something bigger. The ones who really have put their money where their mouth is, and despite the kind of low numbers, are keep investing in the platform. That's Facebook. They're really carrying the VR industry at the moment. So everyone that's saying the opposite is not right. Like, the other headsets are nowhere near, and certainly not reaching mainstream. So I'm really grateful on that front, because I think you need someone like that, a pioneer pushing VR. Zuckerberg is not pushing VR necessarily because he thinks is cool, but the reason almost doesn't matter in a way. Like, the goal is that we get there, right? So he's doing it for his own reasons, and eventually it's going to lead to VR becoming better off for it. So
it's true.
Everyone's can be aligned.
Well, hopefully that does happen. I suppose one of the most interesting things that has happened because of this, in my mind, is a hacktivist group called Extended Reality Safety Initiative, I believe, are working really hard to bypass the Facebook login on the Quest. And obviously they're expecting legal ramifications, but they have already gotten root access, and they've been able to do this in test cases. And it reminds me of the 3DS. I was following the 3DS hacking scene for a long time, and it basically became this arms race between Nintendo and hackers. A hacker would get access to the root of the console. They'd write their own software and firmware. Nintendo would patch it and block them, and everything would be back to square zero. Then the hackers would hack again. I'd be really interested to see if something similar happened with the Quest, purely because of this Facebook login. Do you think that's actually possible?
Yeah, no, I mean, some people are really, really passionate against that, right? They want to make VR, something that is free for all, not tied to a single company. And I get that. I think that's definitely where it should be. We should have some standards similar to the web, which is not directly controlled by any company. But you also need the investment to be made to create the device and to push it to market. So I think there needs to be a middle ground there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on that.
Yeah, it's almost like we need some sort of open source headset that's actually on par with Facebook, with the Quest. But that seems like light years away, especially with the money that Facebook has behind them. Just in terms of research and development.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what we're seeing, right? Even a $500 billion company like Facebook is still only selling 160,000 headsets. They're not marketing it to the full abilities, because I think they're aware that it's too early. It's not something that could go in the mainstream, even with the right marketing. But for them, it's really the testing, the understanding how people consume it, making the hardware smaller, lighter. It's a lot of R&D, right, at this stage. So yeah, I think we need that investment to be made in order to get to the future of VR, which is what everyone wants.
Yeah, and it is good that it's happening. So to briefly steer slightly away from the topic, now that Facebook is having more of a presence in the Quest, I think it's worth talking about monetization and Facebook's sort of reputation for that. One side of it, we spoke about the metaverse recently, and Facebook are making their own sort of social hub metaverse, mini metaverse thing. They're calling it Facebook Horizons. It's still in development. It's in beta. I'm sure there'll be advertising within that because it's going to be a free resource. For me, there's a fear, and I think I don't want to speak for the company, but I feel like Admix as a whole probably has that fear that VR is going to go the same way as desktop. One of our goals is to try and we've got a level playing field now, and we can learn from what happened on the internet with intrusive advertising and over-the-top advertising and optimization that puts advertisers before users. And there's a fear that VR is going to not learn from the mistakes that happened on desktop. And with Facebook in charge, is that more possible, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, that's great summary. That's definitely something that as a company building monetization for the next generation of content in 3D, whether it's games or VR and AR, we're very, very conscious of. Monetization and especially advertising today is really seen as a necessary evil, right? It definitely helps the publishers to make money so they can reinvest it in their games, but it's not a really pleasant experience. And that's actually the DNA of Admix is how can we turn this around? How can we make this a pleasant experience, or at least a less worse experience, something that is in favor of the users, always users first. It doesn't compromise your privacy. It doesn't interrupt the experience. If you start removing these things, eventually it becomes almost part of the gameplay and something that is a lot more bearable and actually enjoyable. And so the reason why we want to be the one, we want to grow fast and be integrated with all of these games is because we have that DNA and we can do it the right way, but it could easily be done the wrong way if it was not done by us. So this is how we're approaching this. And of course, with Facebook, honestly, I think in the short term, we're not going to see any monetization in any of their VR titles because they're trying to build the audience. And that would be another massive PR fail if they start to stick ads in VR, right? That would be the end of it. So I think there's still time. They're trying to figure out what is the best way to do it. I know they're looking at company like ours to potentially integrate in the future or work with or copy or whatever they might want to do. But it's clear that this medium is so immersive that the traditional adverts are not working in it. You need to build an advertising model or monetization model that is native to the media. And there will need to be subscription, in-app purchase, all of that is great, but you can see across previous media that this only covers the 2 or 3% of users who are willing to pay, right? And if you want to make it a mainstream channel, that means a lot of users are not passionate about it necessarily, and therefore then we're not willing to pay anything for it. So there would need to be some kind of advertising in VR. That's guaranteed. If there isn't, it means that this is not a mainstream channel. Every single mainstream media channel is backed by advertising. So for example, if you look at gaming in the 90s, this was not a mainstream channel. It was big, but it was not mainstream. It was people that were willing to pay $500 for a console and $60 for a game, right? And so it remained quite niche. Now gaming is mainstream, not because there is more of those hardcore players, but because the audience has expanded and you have all these players that are playing for free. So business model have had to adapt to that change. And this is exactly what's going to happen in the VR and AR space.
It's true. Yeah, well, it has to. It's that is absolutely inevitable. I suppose. Okay, so to sort of put a fine point on this part of the conversation, if the president of VR monetization at Facebook is listening to this, what advice could we or the community give to that person on how to integrate ads into VR? Do we literally just say to them, think of the end user, don't throw ads at them aggressively?
Yeah, I think it's about understanding the media itself and how it's built, and trying to integrate it in a way that is conducive to get players spending more time in it rather than less time in it. And that's actually the first kind of learning that I had when I was building games, and seeing that monetizing my users with traditional ads was the first reason why users were leaving the game. It's kind of, I think I mentioned that before, it's like shooting yourself in the foot, because your goal is to make sure they spend as long as possible in the game, so you can monetize them more. But by monetizing them more, they spend less time in the game. So it's not the kind of virtuous cycle that you want. So, if we start thinking about that cycle, okay, how can we make sure that whatever we throw in there, branded content, it's actually going to increase engagement instead of decreasing it? So you can have, a pair of Nike sneakers that you can click on and interact with and put on your avatar, and with that you are running faster in the VR game. Now, that's cool. This is not going to be seen as an ad. It's going to be seen as a nice, product placement. So this is the thinking that we obviously have done at Admix to get to the solution that we have today, and what I would encourage Facebook to do. And I'm sure they're already all over that.
Great. I think that's a good piece of advice. Let's try and keep Facebook accountable. Try and make sure we learn from the mistakes of desktop and create a better VR future for everyone.
That's right. And especially not copying blindly the models that have worked in the previous channel into that channel. I don't know if I mentioned that in the previous episode, but in the early days of TV, the first TV ads were, I think I did actually, were basically news anchors reading the ad like this, like I'm doing now on TV, because they used to do that on the radio, and they didn't adapt the ad structure to the new media. And that's exactly what is happening today in gaming. We're taking 2D adverts, we're sticking them on top of the game because that worked on the internet. But gaming is a rich environment with 3D characters and depth and a storyline. So obviously we need a different business model there, and VR is even more immersive because you're actually inside the content. So it's thinking about, making a model that is more native to the media. And yeah, I hope that Facebook's working on that. I'm sure they are, and it's going to take a few years, but hopefully we'll see something good come out of it.
Yeah, that is a good note to end on, I think.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks, everyone. And I will see you next week for another episode.